My name is Paul Turner. I'm part of the leadership team here at the Elim Church Group, and this is my thought for the day. We live in tumultuous times, don't we? The dictionary defines tumultuous as making an uproar or a loud, confused noise. It also means excited, confused, or disorderly. Pretty descriptive of today's world, if you ask me. We've seen it in our own nation over various issues such as Brexit, COVID-19, objections to lockdown, and so on. And then we've seen it just recently in America in connection with President Trump and his losing the election, and accompanied by scenes that we would never ever have expected to see come out of a democratic country like America. There's even talk of an historic second impeachment of the president because of an accusation of his incitement to insurrection. And the list goes on of tumultuous events in our world today. It would seem to me that much of the tumult has to do with fear. And whilst it by no means accounts for all of it, often it is fear fed with misinformation, fake news, and outright lies, particularly on social media platforms. The internet is awash with conspiracy theories and the like, from accusing Bill Gates of being behind COVID-19 to the flat earth theory and world governments that don't want you to know it's flat. And what is happening is that these have been drip-feeding fears into people's minds. Fear over COVID, fear over vaccinations, fear over some global elite, some Illuminati-type group controlling the world. Fear that something bad is definitely going to happen if we don't do something drastic and do it right now. The Bible, of course, says quite a bit about fear. In Job 3 and verse 25, we find Job saying, "What I fear comes upon me, and what I dread befalls me." Someone said that fear is faith operating in reverse. In other words, it's a bit like a magnet, drawing to you exactly what you fear, just as faith draws to you what you are believing for. And the problem is, when we let fear in, it will dominate our thought life. It will keep you awake at night. It will wake you in the middle of your sleep, telling you the worst is about to happen. Fear can steal your joy. It can drain your enthusiasm. Fear can even make you sick. Now, the book of Job begins in heaven, in the very throne room of God, in fact, and it explains to its readers what is happening. But of course, Job is completely unaware of any of it. From his perspective, the trouble that comes upon him seems to come out of nowhere. But the reality was, it wasn't out of nowhere. Job certainly went through unbelievable trouble. But the trouble came about because of his fear. And it was a test to reveal his faith in God. Job had been living in God's blessing. But his fear gave Satan a legal right to attack, and attack he did. Satan's attack destroyed the blessings that God had given to Job. And it's so easy, isn't it, to look at the world around us and see the world seemingly spinning out of control and to see nothing but sickness and death and negativity. And when we think like that, no wonder people are afraid. And if we allow that fear to dominate our thoughts and our actions, we are effectively in the same place as Job. And all because we believe a lie. And the basic lie is that the world is out of control. And that's perhaps why the conspiracy theories are so attractive and popular to some as an explanation. But the reality is, it isn't out of control. Daniel 4 says the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on the earth. And he's a sovereign who never loses control. Job says in Job 42, "I know that you can do all things and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted." Now you and I have the choice. to believe that God is in control, taking care of us, watching over us, and that good things are ahead, or we can choose to live fearful. We can choose to live expecting the worst and wondering if we're going to make it. People say, I'm afraid I'm going to catch COVID. Or I'm afraid the vaccine will change my DNA. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job. And whilst I'm not trying to minimize the importance of those things, I mean, we do need to keep ourselves safe. And concern is understandable. But we also recognize that if we are not careful and concentrate only on the negative, we are in danger of choosing fear instead of faith. Fear and faith have something in common, They both ask us to believe what we cannot see. Hebrews 11 and verse 1 says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." It's time, friends, to choose faith instead of fear. After all, which is easier to say? All things work together for good for those who love God and remain in his purpose? Or for us to say, this is bad, I will plan for the worst? It takes the same amount of energy to say God loves me and will take care of me as it does to say this will be the end of me. I love what it says in 2 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 7. It says, "For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." 2 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 5 says, "Casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ." Friends, we can't let our fears run away with us. We've got to bring those thoughts into captivity. Now, I started my talk by talking about tumult, and I will finish by saying that Jesus specializes in calming tumult, just as he stilled the storm that day on the Sea of Galilee by saying, "Peace, be still." The disciples, if you remember, had been afraid. They thought he was just asleep in the boat and that he didn't care whether they lived or died. But he showed that he was Lord over the storm. And he can calm the storms of your life too. He can take away your fears if you're willing to trust him. Don't forget that Jesus was right there with them in that storm the whole time. Every blast of the same storm that hit them hit Jesus too. And no matter where we are in the storms of our lives, no matter what my fears are, Jesus is right here with me. And he's promised he will never leave me or forsake me. And that promise is to you too. I noticed that in Job 40, it says, "Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm." Friends, in the tumults of life, we can know that God has not forgotten about us. He's not sleeping on the job. Yes, there are times when heaven seems unresponsive. Heaven seems like it's brass. But he will speak out of the storm. Let me ask you, what voices have you been listening to? Have you been allowing what you fear to come upon you and steal all the joy of the blessing that God has given you? And to steal the manifestations of the blessing he still wants to give you? If so, remember that, this wasn't the end of Job's story. God spoke out of the storm, and God will speak out of the storm for you too. When Job repented, God restored double all that Satan had taken. And he will do the same for you and I, if we will wholeheartedly put our faith and our trust in him. Thank you for listening.